Thanks very much. These are new shoes, by the way, so I'm testing them out, which is like the worst advice you ever give to a client when you say, oh, if you're going to be presenting, wear clothes you're really comfortable in that you were before. So I've been walking with Kathleen all morning and wobbling down the stairs, having to kind of grab on like I'm on the Titanic. So if you see me keel over, don't worry, I will get up, but it's because they're quite new and my toes are killing me. Still, from content to conversation, are you? Oh, are you falling to pieces?
My mic is coming apart.
Okay. So.
Can you hear me okay?
No?
Hello?
Is that better? Okay.
I'm talking like this.
So Paul just very kindly introduced us. The reason for the kind of substitution and our working together was that actually Kathleen and I worked on the pilot of storytelling from content to conversation 22 months ago now?
22 months
ago. Do you want me to hold on to that? Is that all right?
I'm just going to put it
okay.
over.
22 months ago when we started it, and we piloted it, to Paul's earlier point about good things starting in Europe, we piloted it with Kathleen's Central Eastern Europe team, which I think, again, is something that's quite interesting that, you know, this wasn't something that came over from New York. This wasn't something that was just stated in London. This was something that was actually developed with senior leadership teams and PR professionals in Central and Eastern Europe, and that's why we think it's quite an exciting thing to look at. Okay, so whilst Kathleen gets fixed there, I'm going to show you a picture of a whole bunch of hands. Okay. I love this picture. This is from about 40,000 BC. 40,000 BC. So I guess the first thing to say is that pretty much everybody in this room is related to somebody who put their hands up there. So, you know, that's all of our ancestors. That's their little snap. That's their we were here. This is a sacred place for our ancestors. This is a bunch of people saying, we were here, this matters to us, all of us are part of this. It's lovely. It's really important. It's a tribe coming together. It's marking the spot. It's showing other people the way. Everybody is engaged in storytelling. Everybody. And yet, when it comes to organizations and companies, we treat storytelling like some caste of high priests where only PR and Marcoms people are allowed to do it. We're the storytellers because we're the super creative guardians of the flame that really get how to do this. And it's so specialized that nobody else can tell stories. Well, we might let our consumers and customers tell stories. We might, because that's kind of nice and that's having a bit of a conversation. But nobody else within the organization is allowed to touch this, which is patently crazy. Patently crazy, because we are all storytellers and have been since 40,000 BC. And what we're going to talk you through today, I think, is actually a genuinely radical approach to storytelling within an organization. Because Microsoft, when it started to storytell 22 months ago, so it's still very, very new for us, when it started to change its approach to storytelling, it decided to do it in a way that actually helped to drive organizational change. And it did it in a way that involved every single person within the organization. So whilst, yes, aha, you're back. Fabulous. Whilst, yes, Central Eastern Europe communications was very much at the heart of the development of storytelling, we have ended up training thousands and thousands of people worldwide, including, and I kid you not, finance teams who go in and negotiate contracts. And I have trained finance people to tell more engaging stories because it means that their contract negotiations will go better. That's the power of storytelling. And frankly, when you can demonstrate that kind of measurement and success into a business, particularly one that's data-driven, storytelling is on everybody's lips.
Definitely. I mean, we took a real risk with this across the organization, but also within Central and Eastern Europe. Kate and I worked over the summer, I think,
a lot,
of 2012 on developing an approach and a methodology to storytelling that we thought could resonate not only with our communicators, but also with our stakeholders, our business decision makers, our leadership teams in areas around the world and also in Redmond. We piloted this initial approach with 150 people in our marketing and operations organization in Central and Eastern Europe in August. And as Kate said, very rapidly, that moved to more than 4,000 people within the organization.
Yeah, totally. And it's all cascaded out from there. Okay, so why? Q man looking slightly horrified, using a Connect, which is a product. We're weaving that into the presentation. I hope you notice this. So Cue horrified looking man. Why did we start storytelling in Europe? Well, actually, it happened not necessarily in Central Eastern Europe, but our original coming together to discuss this dilemma was the closing of the antitrust case that some of you may be familiar with. And Microsoft came out of that period with its reputation slightly bruised and battered. And certainly, as far as lots of our stakeholders were concerned, it was seen very much as a monolithic American multinational, and it really wasn't given credit for its history within the region, or in fact of its deep sort of investment and ties, you know, to everybody from NGOs through to governments.
I would agree. We were aware of what we had just come out of, but we also knew we had contributed a lot in Europe. We knew we weren't getting credit for it. And we knew that the way that we were talking about what we were doing in Europe had to change. And that really was, I think, the kernel and the seed for moving into storytelling.
Yeah. And so I think the change was, and again, people talked about measurements. There was a conversation about measurement early on. Microsoft is, okay, prepare to hold on to your seats, a data-driven organization.
Shh. Don't tell anyone.
Yeah, right,
please.
Okay. So we'll just get out in the open now. Microsoft is a data-driven organization, which means that if you're going to present a case for organizational change or for funding something or for resourcing something with a team, you have to make that case with data in order to be credible. And frankly, that's as it should be. But what was really interesting in terms of how Microsoft was looking to engage its different stakeholders was there was so much data about these people. So Microsoft knew to the 0.001% degree what people did, where they were, what their buying patterns were, what their journey towards purchasing was. All of this was richly known throughout the whole organization. There was even, if you like, too much data. Yep. So how do you begin to tell a story?
We needed to act like Spock. For those of you that are Star Trek fans, we have lots of data to deal with, but we actually need somebody to pull that data together and gain insight from that data. And that was a big difference and a big change for us.
I think so. I mean, I think the aha moment was working, again, with the whole of the company saying it's about hearts and minds. Right. It's about the rational and the emotional. And if we're going to tell engaging stories to our audiences, whom we know an awful lot about, and we have deep, deep research, we need to be translating that data into insight, because data isn't insight. And I think a lot of companies, particularly those that have an engineering heritage or come from a very tech background, data is regarded as, well, there you go. I know there are 2 million people who wake up at 6 o'clock every morning, and therefore surely that must help you tell a more informed story to them because you know where they are. And that's not true. So we needed to change data into insight. We also, however, needed to reassure the company that there was going to be a degree of consistency and measurement in what we were doing. So the first thing we did was to put together a framework which enabled local people to tell stories in their own tone of voice, in their own particular way, in a way that would be relevant to the end audience. So, you know, kind of reverse engineering that whole we'll broadcast and you'll listen. So we put a framework in place. You would expect an organization like Microsoft to do that. It was called the Global Storytelling Agenda, and it got rolled out globally, and that was great. It was something that people could understand. It was tangible. People could measure things against it.
And let's talk really briefly, because Global Storytelling Agenda probably can mean many different things to many different people. But what it really is, simply put, it's audience-centric messaging. So instead of basically mapping mapping the messages that we want to deliver to the audiences that we hope will be receiving them and engaging with them. And again, that was a core shift for us as well. Starting with the audience first instead of the data.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And to your famous point, oh no, you'll come on to that. I won't spoil your lines. Sorry, that's dreadful. I'm about to steal.
You can
no, it's fine. We'll do this. So there we had it. So we had the Global Storytelling Agenda. It was rolled out globally. It was consistent. People were delivering more engaging stories. We could see that in the highly measured results that were coming out. The stories were more engaging. Messages were landing. We were getting more traction socially. All of that was super. But then how to, and I'm about to use a word that I never thought I would use, and I'm sorry, I'm saying it in public. My parents, who were both school teachers, would be horrified. How do you operationalize that? Yes.
It is a very, very often used word at Microsoft.
It is. How do you operationalize that? That's what we got asked.
How do you measure it? What are the KPIs? Tell me, tell me, tell me. That is what our leadership looks for.
Yeah.
That is what they ask of us. So there are certain components we had to demonstrate to them about how we were going to see a return on this people, time, and money investment in storytelling.
Yeah. How do you make it work in human parlance? How do you make this thing work? It's a great concept.
What is it going to look like? The very first question I received from our chief marketing officer in Central and Eastern Europe was, how are you going to operationalize this?
Yeah. So
I'm not joking. It was the very first question I received, and thus was born the methodology.
So here we go. This is how you operationalize storytelling. I can tell you're all giddy with excitement, but stay with us because actually this really works.
It starts with the audience, which is a big shift again for us. Instead of focusing on the data, we actually focused on the audience. I mean, how many of you sat in a room with a client or a business partner and said, who's the audience? And they'll say, well, everyone's the audience. Well, that's not the right answer, unfortunately, anymore. And so what we did through this methodology is no matter if you were a marketing leader or a comms lead in a country like the Czech Republic, the first step in storytelling is really to clearly define your audience. And that's what we asked the individuals who were working on, would get into work groups and work on this methodology to do. They needed to start with the audience first. And typically, it was the most difficult thing for groups to focus on. Because if they knew if they didn't get that audience correct, everything else would fall apart. It would be very difficult to create that storytelling campaign if they didn't know who they were talking to. Then we moved to insights. Kate, did you want to talk a little bit about that?
No, I was going to say, so I think with the insights piece, once you got the audience, again, teasing out that insight was actually, it was kind of tough. It was really kind of tough. And to the earlier panel discussion, that's when I think you've got that mixture of art and science. Yeah. Data is science, but insight, whilst, you need to be smart and you need to have a process, there is an element of art and creativity about teasing out that kind of emotional connection, that thing that makes people tick. And that, again, was an area where we made people work really hard, people who normally don't have to think this way.
Well, and it's asking things like, say your audience is, mothers between the ages of 25 and 40 years old. Well, you need to ask yourself some questions. You may have data about where they purchase and how they purchase and how many children they have and how much they spend on their clothes per year. But you may not know, that's just one piece of the equation. Insight is, where do they go to talk about the issues they're facing as parents? Who are the people that they network with? Where do they go on vacation? All of that, those types of things that lead to insights that you have about those individuals or that audience that you're trying to target.
I think so. GSA, obviously, as we said, is our messaging framework. It's our sense check. So just to make sure we're not going completely off-piste, it's just making sure, okay, are we aligned with the company's business goals? Are we just kind of checking in there and we're not telling some wild and fantastic story that we think is really, really interesting and amusing and very, very engaging, but has no tie back to what the company is trying to do from a business point of view? The assets, obviously, the next phase to look at.
We have, as a company, a lot of assets. Our own assets, we have external assets like our customers and partners. And so this is an important step in this methodology because it enables the teams to sit together and say, what do I already have at my fingertips or through customer contacts or through partners or through our own products that I can leverage in order to make this an effective storytelling campaign. There's always, in any company or organization, there's always that inclination to potentially create something new. And this really helped our teams get grounded in what we already had. And I think that is very, very important because oftentimes we overlook what we have, and sometimes those can be our strongest assets.
Yeah, that's true. I think in PR in particular, we're very much about the new, and the now, and the stuff that's over the hill, as opposed to saying, yeah, what do we have to work with? There's plenty of really rich content, assets, things to talk about that we have.
And this results, at the end of this first half of the wheel that you're seeing up here, is an action idea. What is the elevator pitch for this story? What is the thing that you can write, or the pitch that you can write on that back of that business card or that index card that will engage that audience in an effective way? Hollywood uses uses this approach and this action idea approach, I think, very effectively. And so we've just kind of parlayed that a little bit into our own storytelling work.
And I think the beauty of that is, can you condense your story into 3 or 4 lines with your kind of beginning, a middle, and an end? It's a really good discipline for communications professionals anyway, I think. It's a tough discipline. And we make people work at this, and we make very, very senior executives work at, what their core story is. And we give them a little bit of help, but, it has to come from them. It has to be true and authentic to them. Sorry, go on.
I think one of the most interesting things, again, and I said this at the beginning, particularly around the methodology, is that if you don't identify your audience properly, this first half of the wheel can fall apart.
Yeah.
And we saw this when we began piloting the program and then running workshops, that teams would get to their action idea and they'd say, oh, we got it wrong. We need to go back and completely redefine or be more narrow and defined about the audience before we, move through to the action idea.
Yeah. Totally. No, I think so. And the first half of the wheel is in effect the technique of really thinking, who am I telling the story to? What do I have to tell them about? And then using the action idea technique, which we sort of train people in or drill people in to come up with that core story. The second half of the wheel is in effect where it does get professionalized and where we step in, or with our Marcoms colleagues, and say, how do you then use what that kernel of a core story is and build it out into a campaign? So, with the examples that we just saw of those, amazing award-winning campaigns, you would have that idea of, so let's send the Lego man up in the balloon to kind of demonstrate just the potential of what the world of models can do. You can then build that out into a whole sort of series of campaigns where you're looking at, are we delivering our content in the right way? How are we syndicating? How are we seeding this? And importantly, what kind of conversations do we anticipate will generate? And are we listening into those conversations? So that, I would say, the second half is kind of where all of us step in and say, okay, the professionals are here now, leave it to us. But the first half is something that you can take through a senior exec if you're prepping them to meet with the Financial Times, or, as we said, you can take a finance professional through in terms of thinking about how they might make a more effective negotiation when the person says, so, why should I buy X or Y? So you're really helping people to learn the discipline of more effective storytelling.
Definitely.
So, once we have that, we're going to walk you through a couple of examples of things we've done. We have got a couple of film clips to show you as well. I'm sure you'll be delighted to know, so it won't just be us. But we thought we'd talk to you a little bit. Involuntary IT Manager. I put this up here because this was about, there we are, audience. We workshopped some challenges we were having around supporting sales at a session in Sweden. What was really interesting was we uncovered an audience that we found we never, ever spoke to, ever. We hadn't been speaking to them, but they're really important. They really don't care. They couldn't care less about it, and frankly, half the time, they hate it, because it takes them away from what they're normally doing, which is manning reception, or running the finance department, or being PA to the boss. So all of the time, Microsoft was trying to have conversations about speeds and feeds, or even beyond that, tell great stories about pieces of technology. And these people were going, not listening, mostly not listening because we're not consuming anything that you're sending our way, because we don't read those papers or magazines, we're not in that social space. But equally, we are not remotely interested. So the challenge originally was, how can we help get small to medium-sized businesses sell more of product X? And we started to uncover a whole new audience that we had never thought of selling to, both on a kind of sales basis and certainly on a communications basis. We weren't talking to them.
And where that audience goes to get information and who they talk to and what they read is completely different, was completely different from the approach we had taken. So we had to relook at, we had to start with the audience.
We did. And this is now gestating into a 3-year campaign. It's multi-country. We're supporting some key markets where they need support and assistance. It's multi-language, so we're also socially playing in French and in Spanish and in Arabic. Some of it's proprietary research. Some of it is more playful and fun. Some of it, obviously, as you can see, is more visually based. So it's a 3-year period of campaign, but it's a 3-year campaign that's aimed at a bunch of people who we never, ever originally spoke with. And that's kind of interesting. New world of work. I want to talk a little bit about Insight here, and Kathleen was going to talk about the great stuff we're doing in Central Eastern Europe. this again was a campaign that was created across multiple markets to support products. So we had a whole series of products that were launching that were new versions or updated versions, which were going to help people be more productive in the office. That's actually a great message we all want to hear, isn't it?
Productive both inside and outside of the office.
Exactly.
And that is exactly what we were trying to, the insights drove us to actually change and update the way that we actually targeted that audience.
Yeah, so from an insights point of view, productivity is great, but you know what? Most middle management people are deeply suspicious of anything that claims to make people productive out of the office because they don't believe people are. They think people are putting the washing on, they're watching a bit of telly, they're maybe picking the kids up, but they're certainly not going to be productive.
They want to see bums and seats.
They want to see bums on seats. Presenteeism makes the heartbeat faster of any middle manager, still, across the world. So, that was that. It was about control. They were really, really frightened of ceding control. So the fact was most of these companies, they had a lot of the technology. They just weren't necessarily using it because it needed a cultural change to persuade them to change their minds. It was not about persuading them to invest in new technology. Often the IT department was. So that was one side. We also found a whole other group of individuals who just weren't aware of where technology was going. Because again, these are people who aren't interested in tech. They don't keep up to date with it. Their kids might tell them what's going on, but half the time their kids just think they're dinosaurs. And yet these are people who are responsible for running teams in offices, for making sure that people can achieve a good work-life balance, for working in HR departments and making sure that people are supported in terms of the job they need to do. But they weren't aware of what had happened, half the time since email was made, significantly commercially available. So some kind of interesting insights which really did change how we spoke to these people.
Well, and that's right, Kate. And particularly in the Baltic countries, through the insights that we gained there through some research, but also in research and then also some surveys, and also looking at sort of some informal conversations we had with folks in the government and NGOs, that there was a lack of awareness, particularly before we even got to working outside the office. There was just a lack of awareness about certain technologies that could allow people to work outside the office. So we had to, in those three countries, we took a step back and looked at, okay, well, before we talk product, we actually need to talk about this concept of what technology can enable you to do that you couldn't do before. And so the concept was born called the Work From Anywhere Day. And it was a program that ran actually 1 year ago tomorrow. Tomorrow will be the second annual Work From Anywhere Day in Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. And it was partnerships in 3 countries with government organizations, NGOs, and other businesses, both state-owned and multinational, such as Nokia, to basically drive awareness and to encourage people to get out and work from anywhere for 1 day a year. Last year, we found that 4,000 people actually did that. What you see on the screen are actually some of the results from that campaign, some of the photos and the content that individuals created themselves. Photos of people, as you can see, sitting on a fence in a field, working from anywhere. Updated and uploaded and shared on Flickr and also on social media sites such as Facebook. Businesses also got involved and encouraged people to work from anywhere, getting offers like coffee to come in and work from other places. This actually drove, we created content that drove a conversation about a concept that really people hadn't broadly explored or within the government and also business community. And what it resulted was in conversations and syndications, which helped people create more content that kind of kept us on this virtual cycle.
You got to love any government supports working in hammocks. I kind of think that's, who wouldn't vote?
Well, and we've taken this concept, and it's actually taken on in Slovenia as well this year.
That's right.
But it was done with very much a focus on youth and unemployment. So you can take similar action ideas and adapt them to the specific audience.
Absolutely. So Microsoft Next. Microsoft Next. This is our challenge in terms of here we go. There's my tattooed man. Microsoft Next. Microsoft wins great places to work all the time. and it's really proud of it. Invests a lot in terms of coaching and mentoring people, hiring the right people. It brings in people straight from university onto high potential schemes. It consistently gets really good ratings. That's great. And we hear a lot of amazing stories that are all about the potential that is unearthed in people in Microsoft. But the majority of people don't read articles about great places to work. That tends to be limited to the company themselves or to HR professionals. And certainly, if you're a younger person who's maybe thinking about finding a job, and we saw that in that great sort of case study earlier from Sweden, maybe your connection with a company is not going to be through conventional means, and if it looks very conventional, your perception of the brand perhaps will lead you to think it's maybe not the place for you. So Microsoft's Next was kind of twofold insofar as we were looking at surfacing. I'm going to do this in a minute. I have practiced this, honestly. So Microsoft Next was really a case of, so how do we get really engaging storytellers and surface some really fantastic content that will enable us to reach a bunch of people that Microsoft normally doesn't talk to. Some people who have perceptions around the brand and see it maybe as a little less relevant to them, but equally some people who may well be out there and are really talented and we might want to hire. So there were kind of dual reasons for doing this. So it was a fairly simple mechanism. We did a call to action in terms of submit your 3-minute Microsoft story. Employees, tell us about what you're doing, the amazing stuff you're doing for customers and partners. Let's put it up on our site. And then we would shortlist some of them. We put some up on MSN, which obviously is a Microsoft-owned property, and have more hits than they normally get for when a Hollywood film clip is uploaded, which was kind of interesting, or could be about the state of Hollywood movies today, I don't know which. We also work with Monocle magazine for a very internationalist, a very brand-conscious group of individuals to seed the videos through there. And yes, that was paid for, but it was very, very, very reasonable, i.e. about $2,000. So it was a really interesting sandboxing exercise. But more importantly, we got the individuals themselves to use their social networks. Because these are people who are passionate about what they're doing on behalf of Microsoft. Often they are truly international citizens, they're globally, socially networked, and they are the most authentic storytellers. So instead of us putting up there a very senior spokesperson talking about what a great place Microsoft was to work, we decided to basically have people tell that story for us through multiple channels. We know we reached about 1 million people that Microsoft traditionally would not reach with this type of campaign. And here is, finally, having trailed him, it'll be a massive letdown now, but here's an example of one of our winners and the kind of short film he submitted. Here we go.
Hi, my name is Robert, and I'm in a band. I live in Stockholm, Sweden. But my bandmates are spread out across the country. To get an edge, we use Microsoft products. Here's how. Step 1. Record a guitar lick. Step 2. Share your WAV files via Live Mesh. Uncompressed music files can become quite large. Fortunately for me though, Live Mesh allows me to share enormous amounts of data with my band members, as easy as drag and drop. Step 3. Collaborate using live groups. With live notifications, my guitarist notices that I've uploaded some new clips, and using our group website and group mailing list, he can start collaborating and actually turning my licks into a song. Step 4. Record the rest of the song. Step 5. Manage all the deals that pour in on your phone. An unread mail from Elite Records. Alright. Let's see what this deal memo looks like. 3 LPs. Sounds good to me. Don't let technology get in the way of your dreams. Microsoft, be what's next.
Okay, I'm going to stop the music now. So we really like that. And of course, you know what? The brand guardians are sucking their teeth going, oh my God, you can't put logos together like that and do it. It doesn't matter. People were submitting stuff that they loved and they had fun and they wanted to talk about products in the way they would talk about them to their friends. So we love Next. And again, it's something that we're constantly looking at refreshing, is how we get some of our really good advocates who are quite unexpected individuals to speak on our behalf. It shouldn't just be very, very senior people who tend to always be representing the company. Should we talk about 88 Acres?
We should.
Yeah.
88 Acres is actually is a very good sort of practical, tangible example of creating content. 88 Acres is actually the original footprint for Microsoft's headquarters in Redmond, Washington. It's also the code name for the project of actually building Microsoft's first corporate campus. So, so it does have a pretty important meaning to the company. How many of you had the opportunity to read the New York Times Snowfall story? Any of you?
There's a few people at the back.
So it premiered, I think, earlier this year, and it was the New York Times' first work in extremely long form but interactive storytelling. I believe it either was nominated or won a Pulitzer Prize. Yep. And it served as an inspiration for how we as a communications team could look at creating our own content about projects or programs or activities at Microsoft. And so 88 Acres appeared probably about 2.5, 3 months ago. 88 Acres is a story basically about how Microsoft has used technology to digitize our campus, reducing energy, energy consumption, improving efficiencies, and allowing our team there at the operations center to actually gain more insights about how the buildings perform, how we can save money, and maybe how we can do things differently. The feedback about this the story premiered on our Microsoft webpage, or homepage. And what was interesting was not only was the content something that media was interested in, it actually generated conversations. That content generated conversations among the media community. It was a Microsoft-owned reported story. Yeah. But it also drove customer leads and customer interest. And that was perhaps not wholly expected. And it was a surprise to get inquiries from multinational customers to say, I want to learn more about that. I like the story. How can I do this at my own company? And what it has demonstrated as well is how effective storytelling can be to the business, not only from a brand and reputation standpoint, but also from a driving sales standpoint as well.
No, completely. And we do a kind of stripped-down version called Pitch Perfect of storytelling, which trains salespeople to be more engaging storytellers. Because increasingly are finding that, the hard sell doesn't work, and what you need to do is build that connection. So and that's a very interesting exercise for a communications person to be working with a sales team. But again, that's actually now accredited as some people's continuous professional development. And again, all came from comms, but doesn't live in comms, lives within the entire organization, because everybody in the organization needs to be a better storyteller, because that does have a tangible, measurable business impact, which is interesting. The final thing we're going to tell, and I can see some of our friends at Wagner Edstrom who also worked as part of the virtual team on the For Africa, but we wanted to show this as an example just of how Microsoft storytelling, we feel, has really changed over the years. And there's a film that we're going to play to you just that we feel wouldn't have been in that current form a few years ago. So obviously we'll let you judge for yourself, but just much more discursive, letting lots of people tell the story on our behalf in a way that's far more emotional than a kind of rational speeds and feeds conversation. And neither Kathleen nor I can take credit for this film.
No.
But we wanted to, we can take credit for everything else though, basically, everything else. But we did want to play this to you just to kind of have a look at how as an organization, storytelling really has, nose to tail, transformed the way that Microsoft is starting to have conversations about what it does. It's quite a long film. We'll play it for a little bit. We may, if we get gonged off the stage, we may have to cut it out, so hopefully not. But we'll play a bit to give you a flavour, and then if we're getting rude signs from the back, we can cut it short and wrap up. But let's have a look at this.
And I think, Kate, we also have, this is publicly available, so if we can provide you with a link.
So for Africa is a $78 million investment that Microsoft is making commercially in certain key markets in the continent over a period of years. It is a commercial venture. This isn't CSR, this isn't citizenship, this is a recognition that this is a really interesting continent with some very, very exciting emerging markets. We've been established there for a long time, and therefore what we're looking to do is to get the conditions right to do better business. The clip we'll show you is all about ensuring that, you know, if we're wanting to sell devices and services, we need to make sure that people have access to the internet in order to want to buy those things and in order to buy them from us. Okay.
What a great place to have an office. Being in Africa is pretty amazing. I've lived here most of my life, and the really exciting thing about what we're doing with Mawingu is we're giving back. We're helping millions of people actually improve their quality of life and giving them an opportunity that they perhaps wouldn't have had without this new technology being available to them now. Mawingu is an initiative to introduce rural broadband into Kenya, providing access to the 80% of Kenyans who currently have no internet whatsoever.
We need to take this from the urban areas to rural areas and be able to change the livelihood of many, many people.
We've just left the western side of the rift, flying to the east, and we're going to land down in the foot of the Ngurumans. And there's a small Maasai community down there. They've got no power and they have no internet. So this is, we're wanting to hook these guys up.
It is empowering. It's something you and I take for granted. Mawingu is focusing on a few key areas. Education is key. Healthcare is another opportunity where we can make a real impact, supporting government initiatives, connecting community centers. Can you imagine the opportunity when you have an electronic waterfall of knowledge and information floating like a mist onto that village that's going to have a life-changing impact for them?
It's a day to get to where there is power and internet. It's a 200 shilling journey there and a 200 shilling journey back. That's incredibly expensive. These people just haven't got that kind of money.
Getting out of this place, it will take you time because we don't have like a public vehicles to use here. It's easy to communicate now with people.
For my heart, it's unexplainable because I know the impact it's a lot to me, my family, and my community surrounding me.
We have the convergence of technologies. When you look at these kids, this is probably the most profound thing they've seen.
The community had never had real access to broadband at those schools. Their level of knowledge was really pretty impressive.
Remember, these are kids who have never seen a computer before, and yet it took about 90 seconds for them to get to touch this thing. They got a sense of swiping the device and moving things around.
You can learn all kinds of information about New York, where it is on the map.
Let me say, I have very hardworking students, and given this opportunity, they are going to improve in their academic performance. They will not have the challenges they used to have because of the shortage of textbooks. Now they can get information from the internet.
We've got the magic formula. Through this incredible new white space radio technology, using the old TV spectrum, we send our signals down the UHF for miles, receive it on an old-fashioned TV aerial, and turn it into something unbelievably useful. And in fact, we're actually creating thousands of entrepreneurs. We're taking a Kenyan who currently perhaps doesn't even have a job, lives in a village. We're educating, training, supporting, and giving him technology that's going to make him sustainable in his own right.
So he's saying that we can send messages to friends or to the business if you want to sell a goat. you can send it right out to a person from far that you think even you'll get more money than just selling your goat here. So he thinks that it's just more good thing. I don't think that we'll get out of the culture with the internet.
The work that is being done by Microsoft and Indigo in partnership with the government of Kenya has actually a potential of creating new Bill Gates from the rural areas, because these people would never have access to technology. And access to technology leads to people being more creative, more innovative. We can begin now to partner with the rest of the world simply because we have been able to access knowledge. In the next 2 to 3 years, we want to ensure that we have covered every health center, school, tertiary colleges throughout the country.
So storytelling is both everybody's responsibility and something that can fundamentally change how an organization thinks about its communications more broadly than public relations. And we will say storytelling is a journey. It's content, syndication, conversation, creates an amazing infinity loop, although this looks slightly less like an infinity loop and more like handcuffs, so that's a bit weird, but anyway. But, you know, we're sort of 22 months into this journey. It's been really fascinating and from an agency side, an absolute privilege to be part of this change, and we will keep you up to date with kind of what happens next.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm excited what happens, what is to come next in fiscal 14 with our storytelling.
Absolutely.
But it is absolutely a journey. It starts with the content. Look at how you syndicate that content, what conversations that can be driven, but also those conversations in and of themselves can actually create content that then drives syndication and additional conversations. So it is a virtuous cycle.
Yeah, it is. Like a giant Escher sort of sketch, basically. It will drive you mad in the end. That was it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Do we have time for questions? Are we being kicked off the stage? Are there any questions?
I'll take one question.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Thank you. Hello, it's Ina from Grayling. Everyone maybe knows about the case study of McDonald's, who on Twitter some time ago, they wanted to know the stories and wanted people to share amazing stories, so they encouraged people to do that. And then people started sharing really horrible ones, and that really backfired McDonald's. So my question is, how controlled is the storytelling process? And to which extent a brand can do that, can control it, and is it actually possible to control it?
Yeah.
No.
No.
It's not.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Sorry. No.
I think we recognize. I think we recognize the opportunities and the risks with storytelling.
Yeah.
And sometimes the conversation isn't about you. Sometimes you as a brand, you as a company, you as an individual. It actually, the conversation will evolve.
It will. And I read, just to get very noodly at the moment, I read a really interesting academic paper by a couple of academics from New Zealand who was studying social media and saying, actually, what they saw happening in a lot of social media spaces was really what you saw happening in medieval fairs or during Twelfth Night, which is it becomes a space of misrule. and that space in itself, it doesn't matter what content you could put up there, people will ignore that content and behave
iterate
badly and test out new personalities. So I think to some extent, it's some kind of Baktian theory that's sort of out there if you want to get very academic about it. But I do think it's very true, and I think we just have to recognize that. I think that's why the conversation around long form being on your owned space becomes something that is more controllable, and I think we certainly see a shift towards that. But I think there has to be a recognition that that it is an unruly world, and if you think you can kind of control something, then
good luck.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would like to say, with regard to the McDonald's case study, and I think part of the thing that we think about at Microsoft when we look at storytelling, again, is going back to who the audience is that we're trying to reach, and what channels do we actually want to use in order to reach that audience or connect with that audience. And so, we may choose to only, syndicate information through a select group of channels versus one which maybe would reach not our target audience, but maybe a much broader group. Yeah. So it really does, it starts with the audience and moves from there, and that really guides our approach. Yeah.
Which kind of goes back to the who you're targeting everyone. It's like, well, you're not. So there are spaces you can find the not everyone that might enable you to have a little more control. But also to some extent, I mean, it's a bit like painting a wall white. Somebody is going to come along and write on it. Somebody, and it will probably be rude. So I think, that happens if you, so I think we sort of have to, as professionals, understand that and set expectations and be prepared to deal with that. But I don't think we can control it.
No.
Okay, great. Okay, that's it. Somebody's doing this at the back, so we have to leave. Thank you.
Thank you.